Most people think a compliment is just words. They think a few kind sentences don't matter, they're wrong. Dead wrong, because there's a type of compliment, subtle, calm, almost casual, that doesn't just land in your ears, it burrows into your mind. It makes you replay it over and over without even realizing why. You think it's the words, but it isn't. It's the energy behind them. And when someone delivers it the right way, the way very few people ever do, it changes everything. Suddenly, you feel something you've never felt before, something confusing, something addictive, and you can't stop thinking about it. You're about to discover why certain compliments, spoken calmly, without pressure, without need, make your heart race, your mind twist, and your curiosity spike in ways you didn't expect. It's not flattery. It's not charm. It's not trying to impress you. It's something much deeper, something that triggers something ancient in your brain, something that makes you notice without realizing you're noticing. And here's the thing, most people will never teach you this. Most people will never explain why it happens or why you can't just brush it off. But once you understand it, you'll see why you've been reacting to certain people differently all your life without even knowing why. By the end of this video, you'll see the truth behind attraction in a way that will shock you. You'll never look at a compliment the same way again. You'll understand why some people draw attention effortlessly and why others, no matter how loud, how dramatic, how desperate, fail completely. And you'll discover the hidden psychology that creates fascination, curiosity, and connection without chasing, without begging, without performing. So stay with me. Watch every second. Because what you're about to learn will make you question everything you thought you knew about attention, attraction, and power. Most people misunderstand what actually gives a compliment its power. They assume it's about the words, the tone, or the timing. They think attraction spikes because someone says the right thing. But the truth is far less obvious and far more unsettling. The real force behind a powerful compliment is not what is offered, but what is not being asked for in return. That absence is what the mind feels before it ever processes the sentence itself. When an older man offers a compliment without needing it to land, without waiting for a reaction, without adjusting himself based on how it's received, something very specific happens psychologically. The listener's nervous system relaxes, then becomes alert, not threatened, not overwhelmed, but curious. Because human beings are highly sensitive to need, we are wired to detect it. And the moment we sense that someone needs something from us, a subtle resistance appears. We may not articulate it, but we feel it. Most compliments carry an invisible request like me, notice me, choose me, validate me. Even when spoken softly, the emotional hunger underneath makes the interaction heavy. It puts pressure on the receiver. Now they have a role to play, a response to give, a balance to restore. That's why so many compliments feel pleasant but forgettable. They come with strings, even if those strings are unspoken. Detachment changes everything. When a compliment is offered and then released, the mind doesn't know where to place it. There's no emotional hook to grab onto, no expectation to meet, and that creates a strange internal pause. The listener is left alone with the moment, and in that space, meaning grows. The mind starts to work on its own. Why did he say that? What did he see? Why didn't he stay to receive anything back? This is where attraction quietly forms, not through excitement, but through reflection. Detachment is often misunderstood as coldness, but that's not what's happening here. This kind of detachment comes from emotional self-sufficiency. It's the difference between someone reaching out to fill a gap and someone sharing from a place of wholeness. The latter feels calm, unpressured, grounded, and human beings instinctively trust grounded people. There is something deeply reassuring about a person who can acknowledge you without needing to possess you, impress you, or be affirmed by you. It signals maturity. It signals inner order. And the brain, especially in moments of attraction, is constantly scanning for signs of stability, not perfection, but steadiness. An older man who has lived, lost, observed, and reflected understands that attention is not something to throw carelessly. He knows that when you give too much too quickly, it loses its weight. So when he speaks, he does so precisely, not to create an effect, but because he means what he says. And when he finishes, he doesn't linger to harvest a reaction. That restraint is what unsettles people, because most of us are used to emotional transactions. You give, I respond. You compliment, I affirm. You lean in, I lean back or forward. This breaks the pattern. And the mind always notices when a pattern breaks. Psychologically, this creates what's known as an open loop. The interaction doesn't close neatly. There's no emotional conclusion. And open loops demand attention. They stay active in memory. That's why a simple, understated compliment delivered without attachment can echo far longer than something dramatic or poetic. The brain keeps returning to it, not because it was loud, but because it was unresolved. What's important to understand is that this effect isn't manipulative when it's genuine. Manipulation involves strategy. This involves self-regulation. The man isn't withholding to gain control. He simply doesn't need control. He's already at ease within himself, and that ease becomes contagious. People often say they're attracted to confidence, but what they're really responding to is as emotional independence. Confidence can be performative. Independence cannot. You feel it in how someone moves on after speaking, how they don't watch your face for approval, how they don't adjust their identity in real time to be liked. When a compliment comes from someone like that, it feels different because it doesn't ask you to carry anything. You're not required to soothe, reassure, or reciprocate. You're simply seen, and being seen without being demanded from is rare. This is also why such compliments can feel strangely intimate without being personal. They don't invade your space. They don't rush familiarity. They respect boundaries. And respect creates safety. Safety allows the mind to open. And an open mind is far more susceptible to genuine connection than a guarded one. Over time, people learn that the strongest signal of value is not pursuit but selectivity, not intensity but consistency. Not noise but clarity. Detachment, in this sense, is not emotional distance. It's emotional discipline. It's knowing when to speak and when to let silence do the work. And perhaps the most important part is this. When someone doesn't need your response, you're free to respond honestly. Not out of obligation, not out of politeness, but from authentic interest. That's the beginning of real attraction. Not forced, not rushed, not inflated by fantasy. So if there's one thing to reflect on, it's this. Pay attention not to the compliment itself, but to what stands behind it, because the words may pass, but the energy that didn't need anything from you will stay. And the question worth asking is simple. Are your words asking to be chosen, or are they standing on their own? When we talk about confidence, most people imagine volume. They imagine certainty expressed loudly, opinions pushed forcefully, presence that dominates the room. But that version of confidence is often compensatory. It's trying to secure something externally. The kind of confidence that truly alters attraction works in the opposite direction. It removes demand rather than increasing pressure. And that difference changes everything in the mind of the person receiving it. Confidence without demand is unsettling because it doesn't follow the usual emotional rules. Most interactions are negotiations, even subtle ones. Someone speaks, and unconsciously they are waiting to see how it lands. Did it impress? Did it offend? Did it create interest? Their identity shifts slightly depending on the response. That's normal human behavior. But when someone speaks and remains unmoved by the outcome, the interaction loses its predictability, and the mind always pays attention to what it cannot easily categorize. An older man who has learned this does not overstate himself. He does not rush to explain, justify, or soften his words. He delivers them cleanly and allows them to stand. not because he is careless, but because he is grounded enough to trust his own intent. This is what people often mislabel as mystery. It's not mystery, it's emotional self-trust. Psychologically, this creates a reversal. Instead of the speaker seeking validation, the listener begins to orient toward the speaker, not consciously, but internally. The brain asks questions. Who is this person who isn't adjusting? What does he know? Why doesn't he need to be liked? That shift of focus is subtle, but it's the core of attraction. Attention follows stability. The reason confidence without demand feels powerful is because it signals abundance. Not material abundance necessarily, but internal abundance. It suggests a life that is full enough that approval is optional, and humans are instinctively drawn to sources of abundance because they represent safety, learning, and expansion. This is ancient wiring. We gravitate toward what appears stable and sufficient. Most compliments fail because they are attempts to create connection through pressure. Too many words, too much intensity, too much expectation. They corner the listener emotionally. Now something must be given back. A smile, a reassurance, a continuation. Even interest becomes a responsibility, and responsibility suffocates desire. When a compliment is delivered with calm confidence and no demand, the opposite happens. The listener is not cornered. They are left with choice, and choice is attractive. The brain relaxes when it senses autonomy. Autonomy creates curiosity. Curiosity opens emotional doors that force never can. This is why silence after a compliment matters more than the compliment itself. Silence communicates trust. It says, I don't need to fill this space. I don't need to manage your reaction. I'm comfortable letting this moment exist as it is. That comfort is felt immediately, even if it's not understood intellectually. There is also a philosophical layer here that often goes unnoticed. Confidence without demand reflects a person who is not trying to extract meaning from others. He has already decided who he is. He is not outsourcing his self-worth. And when someone speaks from that place, their words carry a different weight. They are not inflated by ego or deflated by fear. They are simply accurate. Accuracy is compelling, not exaggeration, not charm. Truth delivered without urgency has gravity, and gravity pulls things toward it naturally. People often ask why this dynamic feels intoxicating rather than comforting. The answer is that it does both. It soothes the nervous system while activating interest. It removes threat while introducing depth. The listener feels safe enough to lean in mentally, even if nothing outward happens. This is also why younger energy, which is often more reactive, feels loud by comparison. Reactivity seeks reassurance. It wants feedback immediately, but maturity understands timing. It understands that attraction is not built in a moment, but in how a moment is allowed to settle. Confidence without demand also communicates boundaries. It shows that the speaker knows where he ends and where others begin. He does not blur lines to create closeness. He allows closeness to develop organically, and boundaries are essential to respect. Without respect, desire eventually collapses. What many people miss is that this kind of confidence requires discipline. It requires the ability to tolerate uncertainty, to speak without knowing how it will be received, and to remain steady regardless. That steadiness is not passive, it's earned. It comes from self-reflection, failure, correction, and time. And because it's earned, it's rare, which is why it's noticed. When someone encounters this energy, they often feel a strange internal shift. They become more aware of themselves. Their posture changes. Their attention sharpens. They want to bring their best self forward, not because they are being pushed, but because the space invites it. That is the highest form of influence, not control, but invitation. So when you think about confidence, stop thinking about how you appear. Start thinking about how little you need from the outcome. Because the less you demand, the more space you create. And space is where attraction breathes. The reflection to carry forward is simple, but uncomfortable. Are you speaking to be received, or are you speaking because what you say can stand even if no one applauds? One of the most misunderstood ideas in attraction is the belief that intensity creates desire. People confuse emotional chaos with passion. They confuse unpredictability with depth. They confuse drama with connection. But if you observe closely, intensity may spark attention, yet it rarely sustains attraction. What sustains attraction is something far quieter and far more powerful: emotional maturity. And emotional maturity does not excite the nervous system into chaos, it settles it into safety. Safety is not boring. Safety is grounding. Safety allows the mind to stay present instead of vigilant. And when someone feels safe, they don't have to perform. They don't have to protect themselves. They don't have to guess where they stand. That clarity becomes magnetic. An emotionally mature man understands this intuitively. He does not create attraction by overwhelming someone with emotion, words, or presence. He creates attraction by regulating himself. His tone is steady. His responses are measured. His attention is consistent, not erratic. And because of that, the person interacting with him feels held, not pulled. Psychologically, this matters more than most people realize. The human brain is constantly scanning for threat. In chaotic interactions, even when excitement is present, the nervous system stays slightly activated. It doesn't know what's coming next. That uncertainty may feel thrilling at first, but over time it becomes exhausting. The body cannot remain in a heightened state without consequences. Eventually, attraction turns into anxiety. Emotional maturity does the opposite. It communicates predictability without monotony. It says, you don't have to brace yourself here. You don't have to read between the lines. You don't have to wonder who I'll be tomorrow. That consistency allows emotional energy to flow outward instead of being used for self-protection. This is why emotionally mature presence feels rare. Many people have never experienced it. They are used to emotional spikes followed by emotional drops. High attention one day, distance the next. Passionate words followed by silence. And because that pattern is familiar, they mistake it for chemistry. But real chemistry doesn't destabilize you, it clarifies you. When an older man compliments from a place of emotional maturity, the words don't land as pressure, they land as information. They are not meant to provoke a reaction or create dependency. They are simply observations, shared calmly. And that calmness tells the listener something important. There is no emotional cost to being here. That sense of ease allows attraction to develop without fear. The person feels free to be themselves. And when someone feels free, their authentic self emerges. That authenticity is where true connection begins. Emotionally immature energy is often loud because it is trying to be felt. Mature energy is quiet because it already is. It doesn't chase resonance. It assumes resonance will happen if it's meant to. That assumption removes urgency, and urgency is the enemy of depth. There is also a philosophical truth beneath this. Emotional maturity reflects acceptance of reality as it is, not as one wishes it to be. A mature person understands that connection cannot be forced and desire cannot be negotiated. It either grows naturally or it doesn't. And because of that understanding, there is no panic in their behavior. That absence of panic is powerful. It tells the other person, I am not afraid of outcomes. I am not afraid of loss. I am not afraid of silence. And when someone is not afraid, they stop trying to control. Control dissolves intimacy. Presence creates it. This is why emotionally mature men often feel grounding to be around. Conversations feel slower but richer. Pauses are not awkward. Disagreements are not threatening. Compliments don't feel like hooks. They feel like acknowledgements. And here is the part most people don't consciously notice. Emotional maturity gives permission. Permission to relax. Permission to respond honestly. Permission to take time. In a world that constantly demands reactions, that permission feels like relief. And relief is deeply attractive. Many people fear that safety will remove desire, but the opposite is true. Safety removes fear, not interest. It removes tension that blocks curiosity. Once fear is gone, curiosity can grow, and curiosity is the quiet beginning of desire. An emotionally mature presence does not rush closeness. It allows it to unfold. It understands that intimacy is built through trust, and trust is built through consistency. That patience communicates respect, and respect deepens attraction far more reliably than excitement ever could. What makes this especially impactful is contrast. When someone has experienced emotional volatility, calm feels profound. When they have known inconsistency, steadiness feels luxurious. When they have been pressured, spaciousness feels intoxicating. This is why emotionally mature compliments linger. They don't shock the system. They settle into it. They are remembered not for how intense they were, but for how safe they felt. And over time, safety becomes the place where desire chooses to stay. So the reflection to leave with is this. Ask yourself whether your presence creates anxiety or ease. Because the energy that makes people feel safe is the same energy that makes them stay. What makes certain interactions unforgettable is not just what is said, but how it is delivered and, more importantly, how it is released. Most people overlook this entirely. They think value is in abundance, in constant attention, in repetition. They believe that if you want to be noticed, you must always be present, always involved, always performing. And that assumption is precisely why so many interactions feel flat, forgettable, or exhausting. True impact comes from restraint. True magnetism comes from giving attention deliberately and then letting it go. Attention that is rare is attention that carries weight. The human mind, whether we like it or not, reacts strongly to scarcity, not in a material sense, but in an emotional sense. When attention is abundant and constant, it becomes invisible. When it is selective and measured, it becomes memorable. A compliment, a gesture, or even a glance from someone who does not need to give it lightly triggers a deep, instinctive recognition. This moment is special because it is not given to everyone and it is not demanded back. This is why older men who have cultivated experience and self-awareness operate differently. They understand the subtle power of selective attention. They don't shower people with validation simply because they want to be liked or to impress. They observe, they acknowledge, and then they release. There is no lingering, no expectation, no need to monitor the reaction. And that release creates space for reflection, space for curiosity, space for desire to emerge organically. Psychologically, the effect is profound. When someone offers attention and immediately withdraws it, the brain is compelled to revisit the moment. It wants closure, it wants understanding, it wants to reconstruct meaning. And in that revisiting, the compliment, the gaze, the small act, gains weight it could never have carried if it had been offered constantly. Our minds are wired to notice what is rare, to seek what seems elusive, and to value what must be earned rather than given freely. This principle applies not only to words but to presence itself. Someone who is emotionally grounded and self-sufficient can enter a room, offer acknowledgement, and then step back, leaving the space open. That step back is not absence, it is intentionality. It is a subtle communication. My attention is a gift, not a right. And that communication, whether conscious or not, resonates on a deep, almost primal level. Most people fail to grasp how much influence is hidden in this dynamic. In their eagerness to connect, they overwhelm, they chase, they over-explain, they overcompensate, and in doing so, they reduce the value of every interaction. Attention given too freely loses meaning. Words spoken too often lose impact. Gestures repeated without thought lose significance. Scarcity is not manipulation. It is simply a reflection of the natural law of value. Things are treasured when they are not taken for granted. Attention that feels earned also creates emotional engagement. When someone perceives that a compliment, a word, or a moment of recognition is selective, their mind begins to assign meaning to it. Why did this person choose to notice me now? Why did they say exactly that and nothing more? Why did they leave the space open after saying it? In seeking answers, the listener invests mentally and emotionally in the interaction. That investment is the beginning of attachment and the foundation of attraction. there is a philosophical depth to this as well. Life, when observed carefully, teaches that value is not in accumulation but in discernment. Those who discern, who choose carefully where they place their energy, who give attention thoughtfully, create experiences that linger, they understand impermanence and operate with intention. Their presence becomes magnetic not because it overwhelms, but because it invites participation on the part of the observer. The mind is drawn to what it must actively engage with, rather than what it can take for granted. When a compliment is delivered in this way, it does not scream for recognition. It does not demand validation. It simply exists, and the existence itself is compelling. People are accustomed to emotional noise, praise that needs reciprocation, gestures that require acknowledgement, energy that insists on response. Rare, unforced attention disrupts that pattern. It stops the listener in their tracks. It lodges in memory. It compels reflection. That reflection, repeated over hours or days, magnifies the effect of the interaction far beyond the moment it occurred. The subtlety is critical. This is not about manipulation, nor is it about withholding kindness. It is about understanding human perception, attention, and value. When someone offers acknowledgement without needing anything in return, the mind experiences a paradox. It is noticed, yet it is free. It is validated, yet it is not pressured. That paradox creates fascination. Fascination is the engine of lasting attraction, and fascination is far stronger than excitement, intensity, or drama. This principle also carries an ethical dimension. By being deliberate in giving attention, one respects both oneself and the other person. One does not give attention lightly, which preserves its significance, and one does not demand attention, which preserves the autonomy of others. The dynamic is balanced. It communicates confidence, stability, and self-awareness, all without a word of explanation. People feel the difference immediately, even if they cannot articulate it. That felt difference becomes magnetic. Over time, the person on the receiving end of such measured attention begins to internalize it. They remember the words, the tone, the absence of pressure. They replay the moment, not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it was rare and unforced. The mind constructs meaning in that space, and in doing so, the initial moment grows. Its weight increases naturally, without artificial enhancement. That is the power of selective attention. It is worth noting that this approach requires discipline and self-mastery. To give attention meaningfully and then release it without anxiety or need, one must be emotionally secure. One must understand that value is not diminished by withholding it temporarily. One must trust that authenticity, integrity, and measured presence will speak louder than repetition or demand ever could. That trust is visible. It is palpable. It communicates strength without words. In practice, this means that the simplest gestures, the brief acknowledgement of insight, the calm observation, the quiet compliment, become transformative. They become memorable not because they are grandiose, but because they are rare, deliberate, and unpressured. And the listener cannot help but return to them mentally, to examine them, to feel their significance. That is how attraction deepens. That is how connection becomes magnetic. The reflection to carry forward is this: attention is a currency. It loses value when spent carelessly. It gains power when given selectively, thoughtfully, and without expectation. When you understand this, your presence in any interaction changes. Your words carry weight. Your actions leave resonance. Your energy draws, not chases. And people will remember not what you said, but how your attention made them feel. The challenge is simple: give attention, but do not cling. Acknowledge, but do not demand. Speak, but do not insist. In that balance, you create moments that linger long after they have passed. And in that lingering, you create attraction that cannot be fabricated, only felt. The energy you offer becomes magnetic the moment it is rare, measured, and free.